Good day, everyone. We would like to express our deepest gratitude for all of you for taking time to attend our session for today. My name is Ferdinand Pitagan from the National Teachers College. Welcome to mEducation Alliance 2021 Symposium. This is the Philippine Department of Education session entitled Making Digital Learning Resources Available Through an Online Repository and Learning Management System. We have a very good international panel of experts for discussion. To start our discussion for today, our first presenter is none other than Ms. Sarah Pouezevara, who is the Senior Education Research Analyst and EdTech Specialist of the RTI International. Good morning, Sarah. Good evening, Sarah.
Good evening to all of you in the Philippines. Midday for me in Europe, and good morning everybody in the mEducation Alliance time zone. So I'll go ahead and kick us off with a presentation on developing e-resources for early literacy and numeracy. So all of these three things really go together, and we'll see that by the end. But first, the All Children Reading Philippines project is a USAID mission task order that is really flexible. It provides flexible funding for capacity building, technical assistance, and research directly in partnership with the Department of Education. This has been a 2-year project and we'll be wrapping up in about a year and a half. And one of the things that we began engaging in even before COVID hit was that we would support the Department of Education's Digital Rise initiative. First of all, by helping to create and publish digital resources for early learning. Our mission is K-3 literacy and numeracy. So we really were excited to help support more and more ebooks, because we really believe that digital can make for a better learning experience, an extra supplemental learning experience for children. And this became especially important, of course, with school closures, when children no longer have the benefit of the direct and explicit instruction by a teacher. So the Philippines is going into its 2nd year of school closures. Children all last year were learning from home remotely through printed self-learning modules, through blended learning, any way that they could make it work in each context. So what really does make a good e-resource for early literacy? Of course, all of the other things that make good instructional resources are important. The content appropriateness, developmental appropriateness. But when we talk about e-resources for literacy, in a remote learning environment, what is so critical is that children can use these resources independently. They may or may not have an adult learning partner at home who also knows the language of instruction. So these resources need to really be able to be used independently and have the automatic feedback that allows a child to know if they're actually reading a word correctly. It's something that obviously you can't have when you're looking at a printed book, no matter how lovely and engaging those printed books are. Children can't know if they're reading it correctly without the automatic feedback. And then, of course, the audiovisual stimuli that will support making the connection between print and sound. So we just have to recall that there's kids going into school this year who may never have had classroom instruction. And yet they're in kindergarten, 1st grade, the critical years for learning how to read. So our mission was to try to support DepEd and teachers to really purposefully apply attributes of technology to make these books more engaging and effective. So we developed a toolkit under the project, and in addition to those features I just mentioned, of course, the toolkit went through these different areas of compliance, value proposition, audience, including, is it inclusive of gender and all people of different cultures and abilities? Is the content accurate, focused, not unnecessarily flashy or gamey? And then particularly the pedagogy of literacy. What are the attributes we can really add to these books to make the literacy learning experience a little bit better? And I'm going to show you some of that in just a moment. And then, of course, presentation. So we developed a checklist that teachers could use, or that these e-resource developers could use together to review, to plan and review their own resources. And then this was really an amazing collaborative development process. There was at least, we supported 200 teachers with licenses for the authoring tool called Kotobi Author. That was the authoring tool that had been already selected by Mark and the Department of Education, and they had already trained hundreds and I think thousands of teachers on this ebook development software. But for a select set of ebook developers, especially the ones working on the mother tongue based literacy primers, we purchased the premium license at a bulk rate, and that allowed them to do some enhancements with the software that weren't available in the free version. And we also supported adding third-party widgets in some cases, for example, being able to trace on screen, tracing letters or other types of puzzles. So we developed a process by which we had a quick orientation workshop to this e-resources toolkit. Then they went off and were converting their printed materials that they already had into this digital format. And we did some quality control and uploading it to the DepEd Commons, which you're about to hear about from Caspar just after myself. So some of the guidance in our toolkit, this is just an example of what's in there in the toolkit. For beginning readers, is there some oral narration? This is a really powerful feature of ebooks with the text highlighting that allows to practice decoding. So this Kotobi software has that feature where you can synchronize the text with each, so each word is highlighted as the audio is saying it aloud. There is also, you can use that feature then also to practice phonics like letter sound identification or blending. So in this example, there was audio sync explaining the sound of the letter Y. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Again, it's taking place of a teacher who cannot be there doing this in person. And similarly, there's audio read aloud to practice word identification, pictures, spelling practice, gradually building words into sentences, comprehension questions. So we really encouraged the book developers to make use of all of these features and to make use of the audiovisual features to enhance that process. And I do encourage you to go to DepEd Commons when you have a chance. You can find these resources by searching Kotobi, or you can search All Children Reading, which is also one of the keywords that each resource was tagged with. So to date, we've had about 220 resources uploaded and more on the way. Last time I counted, there were about 11,000 downloads just on the resources that we uploaded. There's many more. And some of the most popular seem to be kindergarten resources and anything in English or Filipino. So we're still working with teachers to raise awareness of all these mother tongue-based multilingual primers that have now been digitized, made interactive, and put online. So the new school year just started, so we'll see how usage picks up, of course, in the next couple of months. And we will be launching into some activities to really evaluate the effectiveness of these e-resources. Some teachers have already done this on their own. Some of the ebook developers have done their own kind of mini action research. We've developed a protocol for a rapid user testing, and then teachers will do some teacher-led action research because we're also distributing tablets with all of these e-resources loaded into a content management system that we hope, and that's going to be part of the experiment, is if you put this in front of a child, will they really be able to open it, navigate the books, and get a comprehensive learning experience out of this, again, at home on their own in the absence of a teacher, unfortunately, for the foreseeable few months, if not the whole entire school year. So I will stop there and we'll see how all of these resources, where they're going into the DepEd Commons. And then we'll hear from Mark about how they're setting up also a learning management system for all of the K-12 resources for teachers and students. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you very much for that wonderful, insightful presentation. According to UNESCO, an estimated around 40% of students around the world are being taught by the language that they do not fully understand. And this is especially very endemic to the Philippines when we have a lot of languages and local dialects. Thus, when the K-12 was implemented in 2012, in K-3, the MTB-MLE has been adopted. But to date, there are very, very little resources, especially in the utilization of technology to foster independent learning. Thus, this project is really, really a welcome development. May I ask, as an expert in this area of e-resources, what do you think are your future recommendations on how to improve the availability of resources, or particularly e-resources, at the lower level? Because according to research, these are really the areas in which there are really scarcity of resources, the K2, the K-3. What could you recommend as the future direction for the leadership of DepEd to augment that scarcity?
Yeah, well, I think what they're doing is already incredible. So many Filipino teachers and e-resource developers are creating materials and putting them in a repository that we're about to hear about. So I think really critical is just making sure that there's awareness about this resource repository, and that it's really easy to find the resources. We know that people are going to go out and search YouTube, or they'll search Google, and they'll take something that they find, and it may or may not be high quality, it may not be aligned with the curriculum, but if it's easy to find, that's what they'll use. So I think the really critical and really difficult part is getting all these resources in a place where people know how to find them, and that they have confidence that those are the resources that are high quality, and that curation has already been done. So that is, I think, the role of the DepEd Commons, is the really high quality curated resources is the most important thing they can do.
In terms of your ebooks, I noticed that there is a solid foundational framework on how to migrate these traditional resources into an ebook format. So this is something that could be utilized across resources in the K-12. Is the framework that viable for across the K-12 curriculum?
I think so. I think the quality standards, the quality control checklist is relevant to any grade and grade level or subject area. And this was based on review of other literature. So we're not the first people to come up with a kind of e-resources quality control, but ours was really focused then on the literacy section. Like, are there opportunities to practice phonics? Are there opportunities to practice decoding? Are you using those features like audio sync? That's just really important at that grade level. That's not going to be so important at upper grades. That's where you want things like a simulation of a science experiment, or using the technology in a really purposeful way. But I think our emphasis was on that purposeful use of technology. So not just bells and whistles or games or flashy things, even if that might get children engaged. It's really about looking carefully at the attributes of technology: audio, video, interactivity, automatic feedback, and making sure those things are applied to what we already know about how literacy learning happens. So really marrying those two things for the lower grades is what our toolkit was about. But I think you can use that same process in other grades and subjects as well.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you. We will be back with Sarah for some additional questions. If some of you do have questions, you could always tap your clarification at our chat room. We would address them later. Thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you. Our next presenter who would talk about the DepEd Commons would be none other than Caspar Groeneveld, who is the country lead of Kenya EdTech Hub. Hi, Caspar.
Hi,
Good day.
Thank you so much for introducing me.
Yeah.
So welcome all. Like Sarah said, I'll talk a bit about the DepEd Commons and the SWOT analysis or assessment we did of DepEd Commons. Now, DepEd Commons is the open educational resource repository that DepEd launched within 2 or 3 days after school closure because of COVID. So I think this achievement is a great starting point. And we've been asked to do a SWOT analysis, look at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of the DEPED Commons. What does it do well and what can be done better? And to make that full assessment and in a comprehensive assessment, I will discuss the approach that we took, the perspectives that we took, give you a few examples, very short examples of the SWOT matrices that we made, and I'll end with the recommendations that we came up with. Now, first, in our approach, we gathered data through different sources. We had key informant interviews with relevant players. We conducted a teacher survey. We looked at website data, public information, and finally the DEPED Commons itself and DEPED information. And we gathered that information to look at availability, access, and usage. And these are lenses that we looked to look at the platform. Now you see 4 lenses, and every bigger lens is a precondition for the next smaller lens. And I'll very quickly discuss them. Availability in a platform basically says what is on offer, what's the quality of resources, what's the quality of the repository. That is the lion's share of what we looked at. Then there is access. Can learners or teachers in principle access the platform? If so, how can they do that? So that is, again, something that's necessary for teachers and learners to use the content. Do they use the content? How do they use the content? What do they think of the content? And while we haven't looked at learning itself, we have to keep in the backs of our minds, just like Sarah emphasized, that learning is the end point of whatever we do as an intervention. So it's difficult to look at learning, but we should not forget about learning. We also used 3 perspectives to look at DEPED Commons. First, we looked at different repositories in K-12 education of open educational resources. We looked at a theoretical framework for assessing the quality of the repository, and we looked at a framework for looking at the individual resource quality. Now, first, with the existing repositories in K-12 education, what we found is that actually by far, almost all repositories in open educational resources deal with higher education. And we think this is because teachers in higher education are more used to creating, sharing, selecting their own content than K-12 teachers who don't have that ownership often, the expertise, the time, or the freedom to select their own or create their own content. But this is something that it also emphasized for us, that looking at a K-12 repository of open educational resource, we're breaking some ground here. There is not much in terms of research on K-12 repositories of open educational resources. Second, we looked at quality indicators with a certain framework for repositories of open educational resources. I will not go through all of these indicators, but I will name a few. For example, one of the things we found within DEPED Commons is that there are categories where you can find content. However, the categories have content that doesn't overlap. Sarah mentioned the content that they made with RTI. This is under a different label than grade 2 content, although it can be grade 2 content. So you find grade 2 content with different labels, and these are mutually exclusive. There is a peer review function in DEPED Commons, which is fantastic and is very detailed. One question that we had is that it showed name of raters, not just teacher raters, but also student raters. And an open question is it desirable to show the names of students with a rating in a public platform? Another thing we found is there's no metadata scheme. And a metadata scheme is a technical framework. For example, Dublin Core is an example of that. And it does several things. It allows machines to find, for example, Google, to find content with some certain standards. And also it allows you to make the content interoperability. There is an LRMDS, there are LMSs, there are regional platforms in the Philippines, and you want to be able to port content from one platform easily to another. And then there was not much multilingual support. The platform is in English. And if a resource is available in English and also in Tagalog, you cannot trace it back to the same version in another language. So this is another point of attention that we observed. We also looked at the individual resources according to another framework. And one of the things that we found, and this is something that will come back again and again, is that the approval process does not work that is currently in place for user-generated content. So teachers who want to put their content on the platform, which is one of the original intentions of the platform, cannot easily do that because the quality assurance process currently is cumbersome and the content doesn't end up in DEPED Commons. Also, there are no source files of material. Again, if there is a file in PDF or EPUB in English, and I want to translate it into Tagalog, for example, I cannot find the source file, but I have to recreate it. So these are the platforms, the frameworks that we use to look at DEPED Commons. And these frameworks led to different SWOT matrices. Like I said in the beginning, these are short versions. I will only touch upon a few of the observations that we made, but we made many more in the report. Now, first, a very clear strength in terms of availability of DEPED Commons is the large amount of resources. I believe there are 5,500 and they are still growing. And many of them became available within 2 or 3 days after school closure, which is a great achievement, and we should absolutely keep that in mind. But a clear weakness is the limited quality assurance process, and that is an opportunity. Do you want teachers to create their own content? If so, then there should be a quality approval system in place. It can be tested first before it's implemented, but there should be one. And a threat that we think is there on the platform, one of the threats is there is a lack of discovery or findability of items, not just in the organization of content items, but also the keywords are not always consistently defined. Authorship is not always consistently defined. So this is a threat that can be quite easily addressed to make it much more robust. So after availability, we looked at a number of access conclusions. There's a very short access SWOT matrix here. Well, a very clear strength, and that's another achievement of DEPED, is that they managed to negotiate 0 rating with the big telcos in the Philippines. That means that if you access DEPED Commons from your phone or your device in the Philippines, you're most likely will have no data costs for that. In the user survey that we had, we found, however, that many users requested for offline capabilities. Not all users who have connectivity everywhere in the Philippines. There are many wide areas where you can't connect, even if you have connectivity. So this is something that is more difficult to operationalize, but something that can be considered, and we know there is demand for that. And the threat is that a DEPED Commons platform only allows access to those who have some form of device and connectivity in the country. And that means that your target audience is somewhat limited, and not all students or learners or teachers in the country. And finally, we have a third SWOT matrix on usage. And again, a strength, I think, of DEPED is that from the get-go, they identified targets in terms of number of downloads, in number of resources, and number of visits. But what we found when we started shaking those targets a bit is that they are not always operationalized very precisely in terms of what they call in project management smart terms. That combined with the difficulty or challenges that we had with getting visiting data, download data, etc., from the platform, simply the data that you want to have from the platform, that combines to a threat. If you don't have very clearly defined targets and you don't have continuous data feeding into it, you don't know when it's going well, you don't know when you want to intervene and try something else. This use of data is also one of the digital principles that the UN defined. Use data continuously to inform your design principles, reiterate design, and continue with a new iteration of your platform. So these 3 SWOT matrices led to a number of, together with the other observations, to a number of observations and recommendations. And we split up the recommendations in 2, in leadership recommendations and in design recommendations. Now, first, back to leadership. If you want teachers to upload their own content, make sure there is a process for that that facilitates that, that's transparent, has clear criteria, has an approval process on quality, accuracy, copyright, and what have you. That is not to say that teachers currently cannot create content. They do it collaboratively with DepEd anyway. So DepEd content is teacher-generated content, but through a different process and a more layered process, if you will. And we see there's a role there as well for leadership. Currently, 3 bureaus are involved in the rollout of DepEd Commons. These bureaus do very well what they're supposed to do, but they don't always align their work. They don't always know what their role is and where the limits of their roles are. And we think this is something where central leadership can play an important role. And finally, as said, having targets, monitor those targets, and have that monitoring inform your next steps, we think is essential as a leadership recommendation. Then we have a number of design recommendations. Well, we observe there's DepEd Commons, the Open Educational Resource Repository. There is LRMDS, which contains proprietary and open content. There is an LMS, and there are provincial or divisional platforms. It can be considered to merge, for example, LRMDS or DepEd Commons to make sure that learners have no questions about where they should go. And again, this is something that came up in the user survey. They sometimes find confusing where they should go to get their content. Improving discovery, we discussed that is clearly something that can easily and very much help the findability of resources on the platform. And one of the things that works very well is to have a grouping of final users, end users, look over the shoulders and ask them to find certain content. And that brings me to step 6, another one of the digital principles: design with the user. Not once, but continuously in every iteration. Make sure that users are heard, that you know what they want, you know what they need, you know what their struggle is, and that the platform serves teachers and students as best as it can. So these are the recommendations. And finally, this has been a collaboration of myself, Dr. Ferdinand Pitagan, Marisol Fernandez, and Sarah Pouezevara. And thank you until now.
Thank you very much, Caspar. Thank you very much. DepEd Commons was launched in March 2020, just a few days after the Metro Manila lockdown. And so far, according to our research, there's have been heightened awareness and engagement, but we didn't dwell more into learning. In your recommendation, as well as in your rigid SWOT analysis, you talk of the principles of digital development, combining best practices for to come up with a good framework for technology integration. Do you think that the United Nations principles of digital development is applicable here? Do you think that the principles would be very, very helpful here?
Yeah, I do think that. I think that what you often see is there's a great initiative that starts, and this is how you should become. Just throw something online, and this downplays the achievement a bit, but put it online, see what it does, look at data, look at users, improve on what you have, and have a new iteration. I think this is the essence of the digital principles. You don't develop top down and you think you're finished. This is a very difficult innovation, and this fails more than it succeeds. So it is. If it was easy, something what we say a lot, it would have been done already. It's not easy, it's difficult. And it's okay that it's difficult. But the question is, how do you improve it step by step? And digital principles, I think, are very good starting points to improve a platform like this.
During our interview process, as well as in the call of the surveys that we've conducted, time again, the redundant variables are the different platforms that are being utilized by the Department of Education. So we have DepEd Commons, LRMDS, we have the regional LPs. And one of our major recommendations is for the merging of these platforms. Are there any risks in merging these platforms? What would be our difficulties and challenges ahead in merging these particular platforms?
Well, one of the things that we said, it's clearer for the users, but that is only half the story. If there is one platform where every item is open and I can reuse however I like, I can change it and I can send it to the world, put it on my website, it's quite clear. If there's a platform with proprietary content that I can only use in certain contexts, it is at least focused for the learners and focused for the teachers. So there is a trade-off, there's a dilemma. It is clarity on one hand, but it can be confusion on the other. So in the end, I think if you weigh both approaches, I think the management of one platform is easier than duplicating that effort. And I think there can be a way where a merger is more suitable than keeping two different platforms that are still perceived as overlapping.
Okay, thank you very much, Caspar. We will go back to Caspar later in this session. If you do have any question for Caspar, please type it at chat box. Thank you very much, Caspar.
Thank you, Ferdy.
Thank you. Our next presenter is from the Department of Education. We would also like to acknowledge the presence of the Director of the ICTS, Dr. Abram Abanil, in this particular session. So if you do have any clarifications or questions directed to Dr. Abanil, please chat them and we would address them later on. So our next presenter would be Mark C. of the Department of Education, ICTS. Mark, good evening. Hi, Mark.
I will go ahead and share his pre-recorded video.
Okay, thank you, Sarah.
Let's see if I can just find the right window.
The DepEd Learning Management System.
Please confirm you can hear the video as well? I mean, hear the audio?
Yes, we can hear the audio.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is a trailblazing technology used to augment and ensure that learners and teachers in the Philippines to have a common ecosystem where other blended learning modalities of the department is incorporated. Teachers can create a tailor-fit courseware where DepEd TV episodes are linked, showing the exact airtime schedule on television. In addition, this also provides a direct link to the DepEd TV YouTube channel, which gives 24/7 access to end users. These DepEd TV episodes were formatted in compliance with the most essential learning competencies, which ensures the delivery of important skills or content. Even face-to-face instruction is not possible due to the COVID-19 pandemic. These video instructional materials work in tandem with the modular print-based materials. The episodes strictly followed the weekly plan and schedule to guide learners from kinder to senior high school, understanding the concepts involved in their lesson. Likewise, it also includes a guide how to answer exercises in the module. Since we have private schools and public schools in the Philippines, the support in providing open educational resources for public consumption is given credits to the use of DepEd Commons. This system is linked to the DepEd Learning Management System, where teachers can download and harvest resources that should only be available to DepEd learners and teachers. It includes the ready-to-print PDF contents, interactive H5P materials, SCORM package contents for Kutubi ebook application that has an embedded Filipino sign language, and even audio lectures that can be used for radio-based instruction. The assistance provided by RTI International in creating digital format of mother tongue-based interactive module is housed in the DepEd Commons. Teachers can select and incorporate it in their lesson proper or planning as designed in their courseware for the DepEd Learning Management System. These instructional tools are very helpful, especially for young learners who are early readers. The system can attach multimedia contents such as image, audio, and video files. The DepEd Learning Management System can also create interactive quizzes or assessments that will automate processes such as grading mechanism, submission of assignments, and providing certificates or badges for learners who meet the requirements indicated by the teacher as part of compliance in their bicronus classes. In addition, the accessibility feature for dyslexic and visually impaired learners are also given consideration so that they can also use the DepEd LMS. For school year 2021-2022, the Department of Education is targeting the 9.5 million enrollees, or 45%, which has access to digital devices such as tablet, smartphone, and computer will make use of the LMS. All of these tools blend together as part of the Digital Rise program of the Department of Education to ensure that getting quality basic education is inclusive, realistic, accessible, and relevant even for our learners and teachers in the last mile school. Walang maiiwan sa DepEd dahil tayo ang gagawa ng pagbabago para sa lahat.
Okay, thank you very much for that very wonderful presentation, Mark. I think we have in the call the director of ICTS himself, Dr. Abram Abanil. Abram,
Hello,
good morning.
Evening,
good morning and good evening.
good evening.
Mabuhay,
Sorry I'm late. I just came from our congressional budget hearing.
Yeah, I know. So how's Congress?
Our budget was approved.
That's a very good news.
After 5 hours.
After 5 hours, wow.
Yeah.
DepEd Common is designed to cater to the needs for interactivity, digitization, and the delivery of 21st century skills, making the Filipino learners future ready. And the Digital Rise is also part of this whole gamut of projects by the Department of Education to harness technology for education. In 20 months into the pandemic, what have we achieved so far, Director, in terms of putting technology in learning and teaching?
Well, at least for DepEd Commons, very clear achievement is that we now have 10.5 million users. In 2020, it was actually the 4th most searched item in Google in the Philippines. The 3 other categories which topped us were the US elections, which was 3rd. 2nd was COVID, and 1st was NBA. So
wow.
It's very clear from the perspective of the users that users found this platform to be something that they could make use of in accessing education during the COVID crisis.
That's very good. And your office, the ICTS, which is the ICT Service Division of DepEd, is very central in putting forth all this corresponding technology for education. So, but what is the central role of your office in communicating policies and programs in the use of educational technology for DepEd?
Well, the education technology unit of the department was actually lodged as an ad hoc unit of the ICT service. So this unit is the way we view this unit is that it's something that explores and starts innovative ways of using technology and in education, and then eventually this ways of using technology would be adopted mainstream, which would be more the function of the Bureau of Learning Delivery. We have, for example, already introduced the Open Educational Resources Initiative here in the Philippines, which was quite a long overdue initiative. We've also introduced DepEd TV, of course, DepEd Commons, and also the E2Li, which is a tutoring program for our parents. We've also introduced the learning management system, and as well as interactive ebooks, which we eventually hope will be mainstreamed by the Bureau of Learning Delivery, as well as the Bureau of Learning Resources.
Mhm. It seems that there is the whole gamut of educational ecosystem. We have the LRMDS, the DepEd Commons, we have the eLib, we have the DepEd TV, the DepEd Radio, we have also the regional LPs, and now we have the eTulay and some other radio and television programs. What is the future direction of DepEd in terms of policies and programs correspondingly to this ecosystem? Are we merging some of them? Are we making one resource portal? How would this come about in the future?
In terms of resource portal, we're definitely going to merge this. We currently have two portals. One is the Learning Resource Portal, which is primarily for teacher materials, and then the DepEd Commons, which covers materials that students can use. We will eventually be migrating the materials in the Learning Resources Portal into the DepEd Commons, so that there will be only one platform which both teachers and students will need to access when they want to look for education resources. And one part of the roadmap of the DepEd Commons is that there will be a section where any user can access open materials. Then there will be a section where selected user accounts can access proprietary materials. So that's the roadmap, at least for the resources platform. And then we recently launched our learning management system. I think this is the one platform that is going to be a game changer later on. We're seeing already in tremendous application with regards to teacher training. For example, in March, we trained around 514,000 in a 2-month period. Last August 30, we conducted another set of teacher training virtual inset activities using the learning management system. And in just 1 week, there were already 606,000 teachers, accounting for 73% of our personnel who joined this. And it's incredibly effective and efficient way of conducting teacher training programs. So we want to move this forward and make this something that teachers can eventually use for delivering education. The 10.5 million users, 9.5 million of those incidentally are students. We want them to shift to the learning management system, because at least in the learning management system, you can monitor whether a student has actually looked or viewed a particular activity, and then you can also deploy quizzes, so in order to assess whether the materials and the activities that we have assigned to our students are effective or not. So I think the learning management system is going to tie up actually most of the different programs that we have, and in the future make blended learning more easy. Also allow eventually personalized learning, because our dream really for the learning management system is that it will provide both the teachers and the students analytics on what competencies they are weak in, and then automatically guide the students as well on what materials, what learning resources they need to review in order to improve their understanding of the competencies.
Wow, that's a very good vision for the educational technology integration in DepEd. Dr. Abram, as we know, DepEd is the largest, the largest organization in the whole of the Philippines. And in EdTech alone, there are several different entities that are owners of policies, processes, and programs in the educational ecosystem that we're talking about. How do you plan to align everyone with this particular vision, with this particular mission? For example, we have the BLR, the ICTS, we have the EdTech unit, we also have the curriculum and assessment. How do you envision all of these entities to align into that one very, very, very good vision of educational technology for DepEd?
First of all, we would really want to make the education technology unit into a permanent office in the department. This is something that we actually proposed already prior to the pandemic, as part of the reorganization process of the department. But unfortunately, when the pandemic came, most of the funds were diverted to the COVID response. So government has not been looking at restructuring its organizational units. So this will probably happen when things start to normalize. As a stopgap measure, it's important that we have regular meetings with the other offices in the curriculum strand, like the Bureau of Learning Resources and the Bureau of Learning Delivery. So these are currently they're done on an ad hoc basis. I would like to see in the near future a more systematic way of having a task force that will focus on these technologies among the various offices within the department, so that we can address the issues of implementing these technologies in a better manner.
Thank you very much, Director. We have some questions from our attendees. This one is from Nina Ingel. On the DepEd Commons, can materials in the minority mother tongue languages that are created by local teachers or by local community be uploaded in the DepEd Commons? What is the mechanism?
The original vision of the DepEd Commons was really to allow teachers to upload materials. But we had a problem last year when we released it. That was the original design. We had a problem last year when 6 months after there were complaints with regards to the materials in terms of errors found in some of the materials. So we had to backtrack, and we limited the capability to upload materials. We intend to eventually put a feature where teachers can upload, but then it has to go through some quality assurance processes before it can get published to a bigger audience, and then another layer before it can finally be published to all our respective audiences.
Thank you, Director. Another question is for the panelists. How do you get buy-in from teachers and help them to see the value in school-based intervention that you are developing? Sarah, would you like to answer this in terms of your ebooks?
Yeah, I think it's anybody can answer this question, but I think getting buy-in from teachers is really made possible by leadership. The school leadership is really critical. We've done some other research on remote learning over the past year, and teachers who get support from their school leadership really go above and beyond and go really far in reaching out to parents and students, and everywhere we've seen where there's been innovations, it's really been a real champion, some visionary school leader or even a district leader, somebody that has an idea and that really takes it forward. So I think that getting buy-in from the teachers starts with leadership, and then it ends with using the resources and seeing them seeing that they work, if they work. It's when teachers see children learning, they've bought in. That's all they need, is to see the effects in the classroom, really. So leadership helps get them to try it, and then I think once they've tried it, they see it's working. I would add that. Anybody else have any other ideas for?
Yes, Mark. Mark, how do you foster that buy-in with multi-stakeholders in all the the gamut of educational technologies that DepEd is developing?
We are just ensuring that our teachers knows the ins and outs, because being a teacher who is imparting also this training with them, we know their language. If you know what they are looking at, or what are their needs are, then I think that will be the buy-in. So we are linking all of these things to make their work easier, making available tools applicable for them so that it will help them in terms of delivering instruction utilizing these tools.
Mm. Thank you very much. Caspar, with your wealth of experience from different countries, what are the best practices that the Philippines can adopt to promote buy-in?
I think one of the things that I was thinking about when I heard the question is comparing it with Pakistan or Kenya, where I also have worked. And what we saw in the Philippines is that there's also a grassroots need for resources, much more than in other countries like that. So I think it is a combination of the leadership and the top-down making them available, but you can see that there were initiatives done by teachers, for example, with Colibri, which is an open source mechanism that you can use offline, and other initiatives that they have used. You can see it when the Visions have created their own learning management system. So you can see there is a need, which is great. So you don't have to create the need. You have to respond to the need, which is step 2. And I think that is where DepEd has stepped in very nicely.
Yeah. Thank you, Caspar. Well, one of the burning questions in educational technology integration in Philippine education is access to the internet, access to technology. Director Abram, is there any future plans to provide access and equipment to teachers and students? Because according to one of our attendees, some students would not have access to, say, for example, computers, bandwidth, and even into tablets and mobile phones.
Well, if you look at the numbers in the Philippines, actually 67% of our population have access to internet using at least a mobile device. In terms of investments that the Department of Education is providing, we actually delivered around 200,000 laptops and tablet PCs last June. And we're currently in the process of delivering another 60,000 and procuring for still another 65,000 laptops. This will be provided to the most of our, given the number of our units, it's not enough for students. So we're focusing on teachers. However, our local government units are also purchasing tablets, Android tablets usually. And from the numbers I'm seeing, around 350,000 tablets already out there. Most of them are procured, have been bought by the local governments. In terms of connectivity, one of the things that we've done is that we've made DepEd Commons zero-rated with the all our telcos in the Philippines. We're also working on making the learning management system zero-rated as well with the telcos, so that it's our teachers and our learners can access them for free using mobile data. And we've also recently procured 1 million SIM cards for our teachers, and each of these SIM cards have 102 gig worth of mobile data, which can be, if teachers are not going to abuse the usage, they can use this for 3 to 6 months. And we're proposing actually to Congress to provide us with an additional load, 12 months load, so that we will be able to provide all our teachers with access to internet so that they can sync their devices with our respective platforms.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Director Abram. Any last words to our attendees in this session? I'll start with Caspar.
Well, thank you, Ferdi. I think one of the questions that it's related to one of the last thoughts is what is one of the main takeaways. And I think that what the DepEd did very well with DepEd Commons is when there is an emergency, you make available what is available and you improve it later. And you don't go for perfect and let learners wait. So you serve the need and you improve later. And I think acting quickly, albeit imperfectly, is the way to go. And I think that is a great example that DepEd did.
Yes. Crisis is the mother of all innovation. Thank you very much, Caspar. Thank you very much. Sarah, any last words?
No, I just want to thank everybody, thank DepEd for letting USAID and USAID for letting us be a part of this exciting process. I think you all are really breaking ground here. As Caspar said, there just aren't a lot of K through 12 open education repositories out there. And so this is really a model for other countries. So I think mEducation Alliance is a great opportunity to be out, talking to other countries. Caspar himself, he's advising still the ministry in Kenya. What is your advice to other countries that may want to replicate something like this? Where do you even begin? What would be your advice to anybody out there listening that wants to do the same?
Thank you very much, Sarah. Mark, any last words?
It's just for us to be risk takers, because if we are moving towards that direction, being futuristic means you are ready to share your knowledge, your expertise, but do not be afraid to try new stuff, because there's no way to go but going up. And being a risk taker is really a must, especially if you're an innovator.
Thank you very much. And Director Abram?
Well, aside from the others, I think one of the things that the secrets actually of the ICT service and the EdTech unit is that we were able to mobilize our teaching force, our best teachers. We got our best teachers to teach other teachers on how to use technology. We got our best teachers to work with us in delivering the DepEd TV lectures using in television. And we got our best teachers also. Actually, the EdTech unit, in reality, does not exist. We detailed a lot of teachers from the field, put them together in one place. And from here, innovation started, and we push these innovations forward. And the things that we saw were good, we took the risk to scale this up as fast as we could do.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And as we, reconfigure, the whole world is reconfiguring on how everyone would be continuing that education. We are compiling best practices. And as Sarah and Caspar has mentioned, I think this is a novel, innovative, groundbreaking, research and rapidly prototyping initiative programs and policies. No? And no matter what configuration of future education, I firmly believe the technology would be an empirical part of that. We cannot go back to the way we were teaching. And with that, thank you very much, everyone. This is Ferdy Pitagan, your moderator for today. We would like to thank our panel members, and also we would like to thank everyone also, especially teachers in the call. We salute you in everything that you do in the battle against COVID to continue education. We salute you and always take care. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Ferdy.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you, Ferdy.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye-bye.